When I created Thomas Linley, it really started out. I love to tell this story. It's so silly. What I've always loved, one of the things I've always loved about England is how they can have two names. They can have double. They can have three names. If you think of, the Prince of Wales is also the Duke of Cornwall, and the present Prince of Wales is Prince of Wales, Duke of Cornwall, Duke of Cambridge, and who knows what else his titles are. So I always loved that, the fact that they could list these different names. And I was really thinking more along the lines of George Gordon, Lord Byron. So I thought, oh, it'll be really cool. Let's have this guy. His name will be Thomas Linley, comma, Lord Asherton. And I don't know I can't remember where I came up with Lord Asherton at all. Anyway, so then it became a question of, okay, so if you're Lord something, then what do you have to be what do you have to be a Lord? And so this is so funny because this was totally just off the cuff. And I thought, oh, okay, well, Anthony Armstrong Jones is Lord Snowdon. So it's Anthony Armstrong Jones, comma, Lord Snowdon. How does he get to be Lord Snowdon? Aha. He is the Earl of Snowdon. So Linley became the Earl of Asherton. And that was the initial part. And then I had to flesh him out because if he is an Earl, well, he has to have a family pile somewhere. They always have family piles. And I decided, oh, okay, where's his family pile going to be? No problem. I've got it. Poldark was on those days, and I thought, okay, I'll make it in Cornwall because I love Poldark. So I put him in Cornwall, and then he had to have a place in London too because he couldn't just operate from Cornwall. So that's the family pile. And then in London, I gave him a house on Eaton Terrace, which is in Belgravia, which is around the corner from Eaton Square, which is where the Bellamy's lived in upstairs, downstairs. I mean, really, it's totally frivolous. It's all the stuff about him just sort of was just invention on the spur of the moment, actually. And then as I began to write about him, then I began to discover all these other elements of his character. I generally do character analyses for my characters when I write a novel, but for Linley and Linley, Havers, St. James, Deborah, and Helen, I never did character analyses. And so I discovered them as I went along. The characteristic I think that I appreciate the most about the character is the fact that he is a man of infinite compassion. And that is what, in the very first book, when Barbara Havers is assigned to work with Linley, she doesn't want to do that. She hates him. And so her superintendent, Malcolm Webberley, who's her superintendent at the time, when he assigns her, he says, there's a lot you might learn from working with Linley. And he doesn't tell her what. And what she discovers by the end of the novel is what she has to learn from Linley is his compassion, because he shows that compassion not only to the the woman who has committed the crime, but he also shows compassion to her, to Barbara Havers. Well, I created Barbara Havers basically to be a foil for Linley. In creating Linley, I know I was creating a character who was largely sort of wildly fictional, although it turns out that I'll get to the real Earl, who is actually a policeman. But anyway, I felt that I was creating a character who, in the fact that he went to Eton, graduated from Oxford with a first in history, has become a policeman, is handsome, intelligent, can quote Shakespeare. So I thought, well, this is a pretty unbelievable character, and people may dislike him. So I will create a character who dislikes him, and this character will dislike him in advance of the reader ever seeing Linley, so that when the reader first sees Linley on the page, and he's so nice to Barbara Havers, the reader will then say, well, wait a minute, he's not so bad. It's not his fault. He's, rich and has a title and has a, pile in Cornwall in this home and drives this beautiful car. It's not his fault. Give him a break. So that was basically what Barbara Havers was. That was the function she was supposed to have. And so what I did is that in every area she was just his polar opposite. So he's tall, she's short. He's athletic. She's sort of definitely unathletic. He's upper class, she is working class, and just right straight down the line. That too, I emphasized their differences. And then what happened over time, well, at the end of the first book, she realizes, wait a minute, I've really been wrong about this man. And there's not a great moment when she realizes it. It really takes place on the last couple of pages of the book. When he allows her to do a very, very risky emotional thing, risky only in the sense that if it doesn't work out, I mean, the crime's been solved. If it doesn't work out these last moments, someone is going to be devastated. And he's willing to let her, because she says, let me do it, I can do it, I can do it. And so he lets her try and she succeeds. So at that point, then they are, developing an understanding that grows throughout all of the books. And in the creation of these two characters, what I wanted to do is to create a relationship where a man and a woman could come to love each other very much, but have nothing to do with sexuality at all. And so they love each other, they have each other's back, but the whole idea that that they would ever go to bed together is ludicrous to both of them. I start out with a list of scenes. So I know what the crime is, and I am trying to figure out, okay, where does this book start? Does it start at the beginning, before the beginning, or after the beginning? And indeed, crime novels can start at any of those places. What I do then is I've already done my characters. I've done my character analyses. I know who these people are. I know, the whole list of them. And I look at it and decide, okay, who are going to be the point of view characters in this story? And I select the point of view characters. So at that point, then I think I say, okay, if I'm just going to jot down scenes, what are these first 10 scenes going to be, or 15 scenes? On really lucky times, I can get 20 scenes. And what I'm trying to do is I'm aiming for causal relationships so that every scene must cause another scene to happen at some point in the future. Doesn't have to be the very next scene, but there has to be something in there, like an unspoken dramatic question that is going to be answered later on. That has to be in the scene. So then what I do is I create on small pieces of paper, they could be index cards. What I do is just cut up scratch paper. And I do one scene on each of these with the point of view character. So it might be Linley, who knows what he's doing, what his first scene is. And then I lay all of those out. So now I've got my 20 scenes one at a time on paper, each on a separate piece of paper, yay big, about the size of a mailing envelope. And I then laid them all out. And now I'm looking at them going, okay, what order do I put these in now? That will give me that causal relationship. And that will lay down dramatic questions. And a dramatic question here in scene 1, maybe it's not going to be answered till scene 5, but all along there have to be other dramatic questions asked, because scene 1 maybe is going to trigger scene 5, but then scene 2 has to trigger something, and maybe 2 is going to trigger 3, and maybe then 3 is going to trigger 7. See what I mean? So that everything has a relationship. So I put them all together, one after another. I pick them up, put them together for causal relationships. And now I've got what I call the step outline. And then what I do is I do a running plot outline. And basically what that does is I take, okay, here's scene 1, and I type out a shaping of the scene. Where does it take place? Who's in it? What's going to happen? And I am writing in present tense as fast as I can using stream of consciousness. So what I'm looking for as I do that is the moment of energy in my body that tells me, yes, this is it. This is what I want in this scene. And I always tell my students, trust your body. Your mind will lie to you all the time, because in your mind, that's where the committee is. And the committee is going to be up there telling you, you can't do this, you're hopeless, you're a wreck. The committee is your, who knows who it is. Could be your critical mother, could be your critical father, could be your English teacher in high school, could be your grammar school. That's the committee, and you have to ignore them and just trust your body. So that's what I'm doing all along, is I'm looking for that surge of excitement. And so doing that, I go through those scenes that I have, the causally related scenes, one after another, creating the plot outline. And then when I've got a group of them, a good sized group of 10 to 20 scenes, then I start with the rough draft. And then I just go back and forth like that for the whole novel. A group of step scenes, put into causal relationships, running plot outline where I describe the scene, and then rough draft. What happens with books, especially with that book, Something to Hide, is that I know who the killer is, but I don't always know how the detectives are going to figure it out. So that was definitely the case with this book. I knew from the beginning, who the killer was, and I knew why the killer committed this crime. But for the life of me, I had no idea. I was like, oh my God, how are the detectives ever going to be able to narrow this down to this particular person? And that was hugely challenging. And then not only that, but it was like, oh my, so how is she going to do this? How will this person be able to commit this crime without being caught immediately for having committed the crime? Like, how does this person even get to the scene of the crime? And that was really interesting too, figuring out and seeing if it could be done too. Looking at the map, looking at, I got to say, Google Earth is amazing now, the kinds of things that you can do. And when I think about, all the things that I had to gumshoe around that now some of these things I can now do just by looking at Google Earth and following. And in this case, it was literally following the Tims and seeing if there was a relationship that I could work out with the killer, the Tims, and the victim. And then as it happened, there was. So that was a very, very interesting book to put together. In addition to that, it had a large, complicated cast, and probably my largest cast of characters, and probably the most well, I wouldn't say it's the most stuff I ever had to learn, but I did have to enter a very grim world of female genital mutilation and what that actually is, how it happens, to whom it happens, what the aftermath is, and the whole idea of corrective surgery, which actually was developed by a doctor in France, and there's a woman in Northern California a doctor who does the corrective surgery as well. So just learning all of that stuff, and learning about the community itself, this Nigerian community that is affected by FGM, and who were these people, and what was their plan, and how did they come into conflict with each other. And so it was just a huge, huge story. This is a book that I'm just completing. And the book it's a dual narrative. It is the narrative of the actual, the murder and the investigation. That's one side of the novel. And then the other narrative is a first person narrative that that has been written by the victim in the book. So you have the detectives, and that doesn't give anything away, because you get that right in the beginning. The victim is in the first chapter. It's like that's when the killing happens. Actually, it's the first scene. The killing occurs, and the body is discovered. And then after that, you learn who this person is through his own words, but you also learn who this person is through the eyes and the mind and the words of all the people that were his significant others, because he has a former wife whom he betrayed in order to take up life with a girl, basically, who's 23 years younger than he is. So she then, the second wife, is an important character. And then his brother, who is a kind of like a voice therapist. It's sort of hard to explain. I got the idea from being on location. That's another thing, is that the ideas you get just going on location. And so he's in it. Then their mother is another character in it, and the people that work for the guy who's killed, because he's the tin streamer. The two guys who work for him, and then their extended family, and it's just really a huge story as the detectives sort of narrow down who the criminal is. But what's interesting about it is that the main detective, Beatrice Hannaford, is dealing with this crisis in her own life. And the crisis in her own life gets in the way of her ability to see clearly the crime that she's solving. It's not that they're related in any way. It's just the crisis has to do with her son and her former husband. And because of that, and because she's dealing with that, and she's traveling back and forth from her home to her ex-husband's home, and going back and forth, she's exhausted, and she does not see things clearly, and she misses things. And it's the things that she misses that bring her up short, and that also allow the other people who are involved, in this case, Linley and Havers, who become involved, it allows them to see things that she doesn't see.